Welcome back! I'm really excited about this video because today we're going to discuss assessment ideas that will make your life as a teacher easier. Who doesn't want things to be easy, right? One word of caution, however, easy doesn't mean less work. In fact, while many of the ideas I present today will make your life easy in the long run, they may take more work initially to set up before things actually get easy. Perhaps one of the most important ideas to remember about assessment is that there are two types of assessment: formative and summative. You are probably most familiar with summative assessment. Summative assessments are assessments that are included in a student's grade and which are used to make decisions or judgments about a student's ability in connection with some type of benefit or perk. Most schools or language programs, for example, determine whether a student can proceed to the next level in the program based on that student's grade in the previous course. This is a clear example of summative assessment. Formative assessment, on the other hand, is assessment given to provide feedback to a student or determine how to proceed with their instruction. Although summative assessment might seem more important than formative assessment, I believe that most assessment should be formative and given for the purpose of letting learners know where they are in their learning and to find gaps in their learning that need to be corrected with additional instruction or practice. In that sense, almost everything you ask students to do for independent practice is formative assessment, but probably should not be summative. Continuing with that distinction, let's talk about another important and time-saving principle when it comes to grading. Not everything has to be graded. Let me say that again. Not everything students do has to be graded. Sometimes I may give my students a reading assignment for homework and then have a discussion about it in class the next day. During the discussion, I'm paying attention to who comments and about what, and noticing which important points in the reading were not mentioned by students. Thus, the discussion becomes a formative assessment, informing my instruction and letting me know how much the students have understood from their independent practice. Similarly, I could have created a short quiz that I hand to students as they walk in, perhaps as a way of taking attendance. I might glance at the results to see which points I need to bring up again, but would not enter the grade into the gradebook. Shocking? No, normal. When evaluating student work, whether to assign a grade for summative assessment or simply to provide feedback as formative assessment, it is important to have a very clear rubric. In using the word rubric, I am referring generally to the guidelines you use for grading an assignment. There are many different ways to create a rubric, but the most common method is to arrange the guidelines into a matrix, with grading categories down one side of the matrix and grading levels across the top. For example, if I was creating a rubric for a writing assignment, I may want to assess students' grammar, spelling, and punctuation. But I may also want to assess their ability to connect ideas together to support an argument. So, I would put grammar, or mechanics, and cohesion as two of my grading categories. In assessing these categories, I would want to think about the characteristics of great, good, average, and poor mechanics or cohesion. I would put these levels across the top and list the individual characteristics in the boxes of the matrix. For example, I might describe great mechanics in this way: no more than 2 grammar, spelling, or punctuation errors. No more than 4 errors combined. Good mechanics in this way: no more than 3 grammar, spelling, or punctuation errors. No more than 7 errors combined. Average mechanics in this way: no more than 4 grammar, spelling, or punctuation errors. No more than 10 errors combined. And poor mechanics like this: more than 4 grammar, spelling, or punctuation errors. More than 10 errors combined. I would create similar levels for cohesion and any other grading categories that I want to assess in their writing. Having clear descriptions of the characteristics of a particular category at a particular level makes it easier for me to evaluate students' abilities. Having a clear rubric also helps communicate to students exactly how they'll be evaluated and what is expected of them. That leads to another important tip. Once you have worked the small errors out of an assessment, the kinks, so to speak, save some of your students' work to give an example of each level. It is appropriate to ask students before you use their work as an example, and you should remove students' names or other personal information to protect their privacy. But having examples of what each level looks like makes it very easy to show students exactly what you want them to do. Model, always model. Once students are clear on what the rubric means and how to use it, you might even have students provide feedback to their classmates using the rubric, taking some of the time burden off of you as the teacher while still providing valuable feedback to students on their work. This is called peer review or peer assessment, and boy, can it save me time. You can use peer review in other ways as well. Having students discuss something you have just taught and then share the main points of their discussion is an excellent way to quickly see if they have understood your instruction or not. Or you might ask students to work together to create quiz questions about what you are currently studying, perhaps as a guided practice, and then have them create questions independently as both independent practice and formative assessment. Using peer review as a formative assessment allows students to get feedback on their work while also allowing you to see how students evaluate each other and if they've really learned. Once you have provided ample opportunities for the students to get feedback and for you to check for gaps in their understanding, you can give the students a more formal, summative assessment. As I mentioned before, a summative assessment is an opportunity for the students to prove what they can do. Students should feel well prepared for any summative assessment provided your objectives, learning activities, and formative assessments are all aligned. Use the same rubrics you use for formative assessments and peer feedback when grading summative assessments of a similar format. Suddenly including a new grading category is not only unfair to students, but puts your summative assessment out of alignment with your other assessments and learning activities. Finally, to make your life easier, don't be afraid to look for so-called shortcuts that decrease the amount of time you have to spend providing feedback. Create a list of error codes that you can refer students to when providing feedback on writing assignments. For example, rather than having to write sentence structure error or check your grammar 100 times, you can just notate G or SS or some other shorthand code, and students know to look up that code on the chart they received at the beginning of the semester. You can also find a lot of time-saving features using technology for assessment. My friend and co-instructor on this course, Justin Schewel, uses in-class polling a lot in his classroom for formative assessment. Students use the internet or an app on their phones to access his polling room. And when he wants to check understanding, he simply asks a question and the students answer on their phones. The answers are usually anonymous, and so students who might be afraid to raise their hand and speak out in class are more inclined to participate, ensuring that he gets answers from every student. The software also collates the students' responses so he can easily see which questions cause the most confusion and quickly determine where further instruction is needed. There are many different apps and websites that make in-class live polling possible. Other technology solutions let you enter your students' names and then randomly select a student each time you need to call on someone, making sure all students get the opportunity to speak in class and no one is left out. I am sure if you ask your friends and colleagues in your school or professional association, you will find many other ways to use technology to make your assessment life easier. Well, that's all for now. In our next video, we'll once again have the chance to see 3 teachers in assessment action and evaluate their performances. See you next time on Teach English Now.